Jeff Allen, welcome to the Chad Silveus Show.
It's nice to be here, finally. Yeah.
Well, Jeff, let me tell you, I have a page here in front of me with all of your accolades, right? But before I get to that, to introduce you more, I want to tell you how I know of you, because you are a comedian, and the reason that I know of you and found you is because on Facebook, literally, you are probably the most reposted comedian I have ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, that's right. I have friends that I golfed with for 6 or 7 years, and they go, I didn't even know what you did for a living. Now I can't get you out of my feed.
Right. Every person I know, I think, has posted one of your bits or your stand-up routine, or like literally, like before I knew your name, I always thought of you as the guy that's always on Facebook and YouTube everywhere I look. So,
well, that's good then. The internet is a fascinating animal to me. I'm 63 years old, and obviously I didn't grow up with it. So.
It looks like it has been good to you, and I've got some other things that you've done. People may have seen you in before we get into the meat of everything, but you are a comedian who's been on Showtime, Comedy Central, VH1, Access TV, Fox Nation's quiz show, Grand Ole Opry, TBN's Huckabee. You've been in a critically acclaimed film, The Apostles of Comedy, a syndicated comedy series called Bananas. You've had your own 1-hour comedy special on Family Net, and also you were in a film, a Warner Brothers film, Thou Shalt Laugh.
Yes.
And also a comedy special, Make Comedy Great Again. But once again, most people may have known you for YouTube. I mean, you have over 100 million views on your dry comedy bar routines already this year. So that being said, how did you get into comedy?
I was working for a jewelry company. I was about 21 years old. I wasn't happy working where I was at. And, I had seen some comedians perform. My brother was a musician, and he had some comedians open for him one time at a club. And I thought, boy, that would be kind of neat. And then you start asking yourself, well, where do you learn to do that at? You just don't call people up and go, hey, I want to grab a mic and a stage. So anyway, I was at this jewelry company in my 20s, and someone said there was a comedy club, and I was in Chicago. And anyway, I went to the comedy club, and I got hooked. And I started in clubs in 1978. And by 1980, the comedy club scene had exploded in America. So there were more comedy clubs really than comics. So I was able to travel around, make a few bucks, and learn some craft for years. I did clubs for about 15 years exclusively.
Being, in radio years ago, we worked with comedy clubs, and I got opportunities for reasons I don't even understand yet to do a little stand-up. And it is the hardest thing I have ever tried to do in my life. It's one of those things you either have the talent or you don't.
Well, it's interesting because I sucked. I mean, I really did. I mean, the first night I went on stage was a Thursday night. I was pretty hammered. I was drinking. I was a drinker then. And that's Thursday night. The next open mic night was Sunday night. And I went back, and the MC came over to me and said, you're going to have to make some sense tonight. We're still trying to figure out what you said Thursday night. And I was just terrible stage fright, terrible. I mean, there were nights for probably up to 3 months that I would look at the crowd, draw a blank, and I would just leave, not say a word. So the MCs couldn't leave the room for a minute. They couldn't even go to the bathroom when they introduced me because they didn't know how long I was going to do. You've
molded your craft because,
yes.
it's not just, but see, the thing about comedians that I've noticed is, anybody can say things that are funny, but it's not just you saying, a comedian or a person who's humorous saying funny things. It's how you say it that's so important. And you've got that talent.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you develop your voice is what, it takes a long time to find your voice. And I've always said you could give five comedians the same joke, the same story, and you would get 5 different interpretations of it in rhythm, cadence, and how they would interpret it, and the same with singers. Singers, you get 5 original singers, and you're going to get 5 different arrangements of a song.
Comedy truly is an art, and you've exploded over 100 million views this year. But what I find, and I'm guessing, because I know this is what draws me to your stuff, I love it, is that there's just such a connection between your subject matter. You talk a lot about family and relationships, and you know, you have a big thing about, you know, America when you were growing up. But you know, so as I watch your stuff, Jeff, what comes to my mind is I get all sorts of questions. Like if I ever sat down and talked to you, I would just pick you for your wisdom. I just like ask you questions for bits of wisdom on life because you seem to understand it quite well. So I would like to start with just asking you some questions. If you could give me your take on them, is that all right?
All right.
First of all, like you talk a lot about your wife. How did you meet your wife?
She was a waitress at a comedy club, and as a matter of fact, I had sworn off dating waitresses at comedy clubs because it always caused problems for me. But she was in the back of the room, and I couldn't see her while I was working. But she had this laugh that was just so infectious, and she was a smoker. And I don't care what anybody says, smokers have the best laugh. When you cannot get oxygen into your lungs, that's music to a comic's ears. So she was back there kind of gagging, and I thought, well, I might want to meet this one. And then when I got off, she was just knockout gorgeous, and I was hooked from there. We that was November. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and she was in Ohio, and she had a 2-year-old son. She was a single mom, and anyway, we struck up a relationship. And April the following year, I asked her to marry me, and we got married in July.
And it's been obviously just perfectly smooth sailing since then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those first 8 years I call the learning curve. Yeah, that was. Yeah, we came within 10 minutes of divorce 25 years ago, but we got through it, and we it's 33 years now. We just had our 33rd anniversary.
Wow, congrats! That's saying something, especially in this day and age. Which
yes,
you know,
it is.
Since you've obviously weathered so many, because any couple, any relationship, there's weathering storms. That's just part of it. You know, people don't get that. But since you've done that, what about advice you have for newlyweds?
Oh, just pick your battles. You know, there's enough to stress in life in general, and you finally figure out what's important, and you also make divorce not an option. You just say that's not an option. It's just not. It's not in the cards, and get it off your chest. You know, that was one of the things we had a hard time with early on. Was just we felt. That you didn't want to hurt the other person. So, you know, and we didn't really know each other that well. We only dated for 4 or 5 months before we decided to get married. So, but yeah, just pick your fights. You're going to fight. So, pick better ones.
Now, would your advice be any different for people who've been married for 20 to 30 years, the longer?
Not at all.
No,
not at all. It's what we learned. We just, you know, you're going to have your hassles. You're going to have your, you know, and just if you make divorce not an option, and you just and treat each other with respect, you know, that's, and it sounds simple. It sounds hard, easier. That sounds easy, to treat each other with respect, but when you're in the middle of it, you know, when you're angry, sometimes things are said that. So be careful. The tongue can be a vicious thing.
I think that's universal, and that's the wise advice, and that's what I wanted to ask you. You know, you've made it this long, 30 plus years of marriage. I'm going to ask you a question that I hope it doesn't jeopardize that. One of the things, you know, in marriage that is always a tough thing to navigate is relationships with in-laws. Do you have any wise advice on that one?
Well, I don't know if I got along with my I know Tammy didn't like my parents at all. They butted heads a couple of times. So as far as that goes, I told my wife she didn't have to talk. My father said some things to her that were pretty hurtful, and I said, as far as I'm concerned, you don't have to talk to my father the rest of our lives. You know,
good for you.
And but I need to. He's my dad, and I got to forgive him for I said to her after it happened, I said, well, welcome to the family. He usually only talks to people he loves that way. So he must love you. But as far as her parents go, I don't think we were ever very close. But, you know, I gave them their space. And It's interesting. It's a different dynamic having two sons that are married now and the daughter-in-laws. I sat my wife down on day one after our boys got married, and I said, understand this. Those daughter-in-laws will determine whether or not we see our grandchildren. And the wife will determine it. So I said, you treat them with kid gloves. And Tammy has, to her credit, because my wife can be bullheaded, and she has swallowed her tongue and her pride a lot. And we have a good relationship with our daughter-in-laws, but that was not easy. Again, your sons are, what do they say? A daughter is a daughter for life, but a son is a son until he takes a wife.
And I've got a son and a daughter, and I can see the truth in that. Does your wife have any, or did she, or does she have any sisters?
Yes, 3.
Okay.
Or 2 sisters. Yeah, 2 sisters and a brother.
Because what happens is that I find that whenever I think about in-laws, I think about an old Bill Cosby comedy bit, which has nothing to do with in-laws, but Bill Cosby's bit was about if you're a parent or parents with one child, it doesn't really count as being a parent.
Right.
You miss so much of the experience of being a parent if there's multiple kids, because the bickering, the fighting, the blaming, the lying. But with I always view with marriage, if your wife doesn't have sisters, then you're not really married,
right?
Because you miss so much the drama of of marriage, and the bad advice or whatever else.
Yeah, we're going through it now. The 2 girls are aligned on a particular issue, and the one girl is not, and she's stirring up all kinds of stuff, and it's I look, as an outsider, I just kind of sit back and let it play out, and I looked at Tammy one day, my wife, and I said, I can't believe this is even going on. I really can't. I mean, it's over her father and issues, and her one sister took her father in. Her mother died. Her mother passed away, so somebody had to take care of her dad, and he moved in with us for about 9 months. And Tammy just rode him ragged. She made him go to the YMCA and exercise. She made him eat well. She made him do all kinds of stuff, and he got tired of that and left, and went to the other sister's house. And so she's been taking care of him for 2 years now, and his health is going downhill, and anyway, there's just a lot of issues going on around it, and you're right. It's a lot of drama that shouldn't even be in play.
Well, I think it goes back. I think, not that it's funny. I mean, so much of what you've just said, I can relate, in so many ways. I'm sure so many people can, but life's an adventure, no matter who you are, there's ups and downs in the relationship and life. And, I know that you are a believer. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Now, do you feel that, and obviously, I think that's what helps us navigate our marriages and our careers or whatever it is, for me personally, at least, I don't know how people do it without Christ, but the reason I bring it up is because I think it's awesome that, you are completely clean as a comedian. And that's the thing. It's like, you're not only clean, you're hilariously clean. And, I've got a younger, well, he's not younger, but he's actually an adult now, 21-year-old son. I remember in his teenage years, because he's into comedy somewhat. I mean, a lot of people are. It's just such an escape. I would tell him that, it takes very little talent to go blue. It takes very little talent to do obscene humor, but it takes a lot of talent to do humor that's hilarious and it's completely clean.
Yeah, I've often said that if you get a thesaurus out, you can probably 90% of the stuff anybody's doing can be worked within that framework. And, I always looked at, George Carlin was one of my favorite comics. And if you took out all the cuss words, he was still a brilliant, brilliant comic. And if the cuss words are the punchlines, then you need to start thinking about reworking the joke. That's all. The cuss words shouldn't be the punchline. And I get people, I was raised, when I first got into comedy, I was raised by a construction worker and an atheist. So I had no qualms about cussing up a storm. And it wasn't until I, gave my life to Christ that I thought, well, that wouldn't be very honoring of him. And actually, probably a year before I did that, I started cleaning things up. One, because we got called to school, and my son was 4th grade, was caught cussing up a storm. So we get called in as parents, and you start realizing that the fruits that you're creating, that was unbecoming on a fourth grader. And it would be hypocritical of me to tell them not to talk that way, since I talk that way. So that was really kind of the genesis of me cleaning up my language. I just didn't think it was right that my children should be imitating that.
Yeah, we all, it's the thing is that you mature and you have family, have those eyes looking back at you and ears listening to you, you start to think. And plus, same thing with me, with Christ, in my life, he gave me desire to change. And, I used to be a poor man's Howard Stern, and, those days are long gone, but I always found it so easy, it was so much easier to make a joke with something filthy, but, I always thought it was so brilliant, like comedians, like yourself, and, even Bill Cosby to a certain extent, and, Bob Hope, like, they're brilliant, without any filth.
Yeah. Cosby was one of my, absolute, that was my benchmark. I thought, man, if I could get that kind of response and working within those parameters, that would be so cool, man. Brian Regan is really, really good, and Brian's very, very clean. And Gaffigan, there's a number of people out of Seinfeld. Seinfeld always worked clean.
Yeah. I got to see Seinfeld. I was in the front row, and that's one of my great memories of my life. It was brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. And that's what trips my trigger. And so that's why, I think people, and I think it's not just me, because like I said, 100 million views just this year for your stuff. And it does look like it's slowing down at all. Now, do you appear regularly at different comedy clubs still?
Yeah, I'm going to Albany, the Funny Bone up there next week, or this week. Yeah, it's this week. Yeah, Sunday. Gosh. Yeah, I just finished the KC Improv. I was I'm back in clubs. I hadn't done clubs for about 20 years. There was a time where I looked down at the audience and realized they were my children's age. And I was really the only one in the room that got older. And I told my management, I said, look, I'm kind of bailing on this. Just because until I can bring my own audience in, it's a completely different world when people that are there are familiar with what you do, and they're there to see what you do. So it took until this dry bar video came out back in March, and we're plodding along, little by little. We're bringing people in.
Well, like I said, you're like, when I think of comedians that are hot right now, I think of you because you're everywhere on YouTube. So I can only imagine that the momentum's gaining. Now, I do a segment on my show every episode where I've got a beautiful 9-year-old little daughter, blonde hair, blue eyes, sweet as can be. She loves to ask a question to all my guests. Her name is Violet.
Oh.
And I got real creative with the name of this segment. It's called One Question with Violet. And she wants to ask you a question, if that's okay.
That's fine with me.
Okay, 1 second. She's coming.
What's the difference between raising a boy and a girl?
Well, I never raised a girl, but I have granddaughters. Matter of fact, we just took our 3-year-old granddaughter to see Peppa Pig live in concert. But I can tell you this. I took my granddaughter to dinner one night, and she was 4 years old. And probably 10 minutes into the dinner, out of the clear blue, she slid across the booth and she gave me a hug and a kiss. And she said, "I love you, Papa." Oh. And I looked at my wife and I said, I've had boys for 30 plus years and never once, not once, have they ever slid across the booth and gave me a hug and a kiss and told me they love me.
I think you summed it up. I think, yeah, exactly. Because as a father of both, that if that story does not sum it all up, the difference, I think it does.
Now my sons have punched me a lot.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. Yes. As a father, you never get too concerned about physical altercations with your with your daughters, but
right.
It's a difference. Now, speaking of like kids, like, what is your take on millennials?
Oh, well, they're interesting. I am 100% in on millennials. I don't do politics in my show because it's just so divisive, and who cares what I have to say about anything? My wife doesn't even care what I have to say about anything. So, But I've realized that whatever the millennials decide going forward is the country my grandchildren will be raised in.
True.
So I'm interested in speaking to millennials, and I'm writing a book now. It's kind of a serious. It's based on my testimony. But I started in my 30s. As a matter of fact, today I'm 32 years sober. Today is the day I quit drinking.
Wow, congratulations, man.
And 32 years. And I was 31 years old, and I started a journey. I walked into a 12-step program as an atheist. They told me to pray. I said, to what? And they said, find something. And I spent the next 8 or 9 years looking through everything I could get my hands on to make sense and find what they call the higher power. I just wanted to know if God existed or he didn't. And anyway, it's my search. It's called An Examined Life. Socrates said an unexamined life is not worth living. And it's more geared towards, I hope, the millennials, because they're all getting into their 30s now, late 20s and early 30s. And I just, I don't know if they're going to wind up like I did in an existential mess, not knowing what is important, why life matters, what matters. And it all started with me getting married to my wife and then having children. And so I worry that they bought into this whole socialism concept, and that somehow they should be, somebody else should have to take care of them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I didn't start adulting till I was in my 30s. So I kind of have I understand this whole, I was out on my own since I was 18, but I really didn't start, understanding what it meant to be an adult till I was probably 32 years old. All of a sudden I married and got 2 kids. I go, I better grow up, and I better grow up fast.
I can totally relate. Let me ask you this. You're bringing up, alcohol use and struggles with alcohol. What do you, since you've recovered, what is your best advice to somebody who is struggling with drinking or drugs even?
So find a community of drunks is what I call them, Found me a community of drunks that are recovering, and I did what they told me to do. And I wasn't a poster boy for the program, but I made it, I got through it one day at a time. It's literally a 24 hours, sometimes a 1 hour, sometimes 5 minutes. There were more than one occasion where I was literally 5 minutes from just cashing it in. And I picked up the phone and called somebody. And groups that get together, whether they're in churches or whether they're in other rooms, and reach out, get on the internet, find a group in your area, and just tell them you can't do it anymore. I can't. That's what I said. I can't do it anymore.
It's so destructive. I grew up with an alcoholic parent, and also for a number of years I drank, and I quit over 20 years ago, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. Nothing gets better with alcohol. Nothing gets better with drugs. It only gets worse.
Yeah, that's what I used to tell my sons. Nothing good happens after 10 o'clock at night.
I know.
So be at home, be with your family, and certainly if you're out drinking after 10 o'clock at night, then really bad things are going to happen at some point.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you're not political, which is so interesting to me because when I was younger, my first major in college was political science. And now, fast forward from then to now, I cannot stand politics. I literally, my son tries to talk politics with me. I can't stand it. I can't handle it. I don't watch the news at all. I'm done with it. But here's the thing I want to ask you, that all being said, that I said what I said about politics and you said what you said. I am still a little bit curious. What do you stop and look around what's going on today? Because I barely do. I'll see little bits on Facebook. What do you think?
I'm versed in all of it. I watch it, and again, this is part of the America I grew up in. And if we got over an election in a day, in 24 hours, we were done with it. We moved on with our life. You watch the change of power, and then you look forward to the next election. You realize how much power you have as an individual in America. I have no power. I have a vote. It's an honor. People have died for my right to vote. Believe me, there's been a lot of bloodshed around the world with people trying to get the right to vote, and we have it. And I feel like we're losing it. And but yeah, I'm well versed in it, and I just don't think any. I don't know. I think I got 100,000 Facebook followers, and not one of them ever asked me my opinion on anything. And these are people who like me. So if they don't care what I have to say, why would a stranger care what I have to say?
And honestly, I think in today's day and age, getting away from politics is a necessity. I think like an escape.
Yeah, it's ubiquitous. I mean, if you want it, it's everywhere. It's like air. You can't get away from it. So we shut it down and we binge Netflix, my wife and I. And then it's like, years ago when I was smoking pot and drinking booze, and I was an uninspired comic, I would sit around the house and watch soap operas all day and then get stoned. And I realized all you had to do was watch Friday. You didn't have to watch Monday through Thursday because Friday was kind of a summary of the whole week. And it's kind of that way with politics. If you just pick one day a week, once a month or twice a month, the stories just keep perpetuating, and it's funny. I just flipped it on the other day, and again, Trump is being impeached for something, and I go, I thought they kind of gave up on that whole Russian thing. Well, now it's the Ukraine, and it's like you go, wow, I've never seen this in my lifetime. I've never seen this, and I think there's only one man that could have taken it, and that's him.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff Allen, for being on the Chad Silveus Show. I hope to have you back real soon. To find out more about Jeff Allen's comedy or where you can see him online, go to jeffallencomedy.com. Also, search on YouTube for Jeff Allen. I'm telling you, he's everywhere. You search on YouTube, you'll find him. Trust me, and you'll laugh a lot. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Chad Silveus Show on YouTube or any location where you can listen to podcasts. If you love the best songs from the 1950s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, all the way through the 90s, then you'll love 20thcentury.fm. 20thcentury.fm plays the best songs from the best century of music. Artists like Michael Jackson, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, The Who, Duran Duran, Wang Chung, and more. 20thcentury.fm is a 100% free online radio station. Listen anytime, anywhere by going to 20thcentury.fm.